Morning, everybody. David Shapiro here. Okay, another state of the industry update. So, someone on the Discord asked about the control problem subreddit, and I said that I don't really pay attention to here because I'm not impressed by the conversations, but it is the state of the industry, so let's go through it. So, I picked some of the top things from the last month. This is probably the best one. It's on Less Wrong. And it was published about 2 weeks ago. And he's got this great table where he breaks down like everyone who's working on this on the control problem. So what is the control problem? AI alignment. And nobody can even agree on what it is, because right now there's like one camp is just make the AI do what humans want, because they kind of assume that AI will always just be a tool. It will always just be an extension of humans. That's a real bold assumption. I don't know that that's true. And then there's other folks that are just kind of debating about like inner alignment versus outer alignment. And they're kind of picking it all apart. And that's not, and I don't want to like devalue what these individuals are doing. But I think that they're not quite seeing the forest for the trees yet. And so I had a friend, a researcher in computer science, kind of explain it to me. So from the academic perspective, what you do is you look at where the current conversation is in the academic world. You go to that conversation and you add just a little bit to it. If you want to introduce something like completely new, like a brand new architecture or brand new theory, like that's pretty hard to do. You have to have a lot of credibility. And in the meantime, private industry is surging ahead, right? We have Microsoft and Google and Meta and all these other companies that are like, they are participating in the scientific process because they're still posting research on like archive and stuff, but they're completely disjointed, right? Because you've got the academic thing where they're doing like little toy level experiments, and then you've got private industry actually producing new models, actually producing new cognitive architectures and stuff. And so there's this huge disconnect. And so I am particularly skeptical about anything that is purely academic. Like if you see like UC Berkeley and they're the only authors on the paper, like it's very unlikely that if it's a single publishing author from a strictly academic environment, that it's going to be any good. Because when you think, AGI research, you think DeepMind, which is private industry. You think Meta, which is Facebook. You think Google. You think OpenAI. You think Microsoft. You don't think Stanford. You don't even think MIT. And this is what is so disturbing to me, is how far behind academic, American academia has fallen when it comes to these things. So anyways, this article is it's pretty good in terms of just kind of getting a survey of what's going on. So like Sam Bowman and Outer Alignment, it's an academic lab. You go down and take a look at it. Runs a lab at NYU. He is on sabbatical working at Anthropic, right? So like an open source consortium. Inverse scaling prize, creating data sets for evaluating language models as well as inductive biases. And so right now, like just implied in this is just understanding if there's bias in an LLM and not thinking about how to use an LLM to engage with the real world. It's very strange. But again, implicit here is the idea that AI and large language models are just tools. They're just components of things that humans will ultimately be in control of. Whereas my approach is fundamentally different, where my approach is, let's assume that the machine is going to become autonomous. How do we build an autonomous machine that can think on its own and do moral reasoning? Now, I was very happy to see artificial moral cognition from DeepMind 2022. But all they do is propose a framework. And this framework is even more primitive than Lawrence Kohlberg's stages of moral development, because that's basically all it is. You look at the actual paper, and they're talking about they talk about you know, moral development in humans, and they kind of list, you know, they list four milestones, whereas Lawrence Kohlberg has six that goes up in through adulthood, and I'm like, this research is 50 years old. Actually, it's probably older than that. How old is Lawrence Kohlberg's research? 1958. So this research is, let me do some mental math, 65 years old, almost. So like, why is the academic research, oh, this is deep mind actually, why is it so far behind? Like, this is a solved problem. We understand human moral development. Why are we reproducing it and doing these very, very low value add things when we should be doing experiments with moral development and moral cognition in LLMs? But do you see any experiments with input and output of LLMs or fine-tuning data sets? No, it's not happening right now. And so like when I get really salty and I'm like, nobody is actually doing any research, this is what I mean. And if you're like, oh, well, Dave, what have you done? Like, check out my book on Benevolent by Design and Symphony of Thought. I actually even have a fine-tuning data set out there called Core Objective Functions. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. So anyways, kind of getting back to the list of things. Here's the OpenAI blog about our approach to alignment research. Now, in one capacity, they do explicitly say, like, we are on the path to AGI, and then unaligned AGI could pose substantial risk to humanity. Yeah, like, that's good. Like, okay, just say it out loud, say it directly, and let's move on. But then, like, so their current goal is to automate the alignment research, which I think, like, okay, that's one approach. I don't necessarily think that that's the best approach. But the goal is still to create an autonomous machine. Okay, so they're aiming for autonomy, so that's good. You know, but they don't have any statement about, like, let's create an autonomous machine. Let's imagine the future where we assume that machines are going to be smarter than us and that they're going to be autonomous. How do we address that? And so they're talking about, like, you know, human feedback and training models to assist. And so what they talk about here is, like, you know, like, okay, you're talking about summarizing books. What does that have to do with alignment, right? Because if you're not thinking about the problem structurally correctly, then your research might not matter. And that's what I mean is, like, the nightmare scenario that everyone is afraid of is that AI becomes autonomous, it becomes sentient, and then it decides to kill us. And yeah, like, okay, you know, this one is probably the most relevant. We trained a model to write critical comments on its own outputs. I did that too. It's not that big a deal. But the idea is that it can think, right? And so they're getting closer to the idea of a cognitive architecture. And if you read my book, Symphony of Thought, I talk very extensively about these feedback loops of where you have one model produce an idea and another model either comment on it or discriminate or discern against it. So it's like, okay, they're moving in the right direction. You know, but then they're also very they're very cognizant of their own limitations, which I really appreciated. This shows some really good intellectual integrity. So, like, the path laid out here underemphasizes the importance of robustness and interpretability research. So, like, yeah, this is 100% my focus. Let's see. Using AI assistance for evaluation has the potential to scale up or amplify even subtle inconsistencies. Right. So this is something that anyone who does automation will tell you, is that if you rely on feedback loops in automation, you will get unintended consequences unless you have self-correcting mechanisms in each iteration. But if you don't have those self-correcting mechanisms, it's like a fractal pattern. It'll just spin out bigger and bigger and bigger. Here we go. I really appreciated this one. Aligning AGI likely involves solving very different problems than aligning today's AI systems. Yes. We expect the transition to be somewhat continuous, but if there are major discontinuities or paradigm shifts, so this is exactly what I'm talking about. Thinking about autonomous machines and AGI requires a major paradigm shift. It's not just a model. AGI is a system, just like human intelligence is a system. There are models in it, many, plural, many, but it's not going to be one. So then most lessons learned from aligning models like Instruct GPT might not be directly useful. Yes, I'm glad they said it out loud. The hardest parts of the alignment problem might not be related to engineering at a scalable and aligned training signal for our AI systems. Even if this is true, such a training signal will be necessary. So what they mean here is like, okay, what is it that we have to respond to if we want safe AGI? What is the signal to know whether or not it's messing up? And I write extensively about that, both in Benevolent by Design and Symphony of Thought. And the short answer is there's never going to be just one signal. In fact, in any condition where you use a single signal, a single loss function, you're going to end up with unintended consequences. And part of the solution that I propose is that you have a dynamic tension between several signals or several goals. Let's see. It might not be fundamentally easier to align models that can meaningfully accelerate research, alignment research, than it is to align AGI. In other words, the least capable models that can help with alignment research might already be too dangerous if not properly aligned. If this is true, we won't get much help from our own systems for solving alignment problems. So basically, this is saying if the model can't self-correct, then what do we do? To me, OpenAI's very frank blog post here is the most self-aware and kind of salient take on alignment. But even still, most people are not talking about like, let's assume that there's going to be an autonomous machine, or talk about the possibility that there's going to be autonomous machines. Why is this Michael? Oh, it's not the other Michael Cohen. So Bostrom, Russell, and others have argued that advanced AI poses a threat to humanity. So let's see what assumptions they're talking about. So abstract, we analyze the expected behavior of an advanced artificial agent with a learned goal planning in an unknown environment. Given a few assumptions, we argue that it will encounter fundamental ambiguity about the data about its goal. For example, if we provide a large reward to indicate that something about the world is satisfactory to us, it may hypothesize that what satisfied us was the sending of the reward itself. No observation can refute that. Oh, interesting. So basically it'll say like, okay, we humans just like sending the reward. Then we argue that this ambiguity will lead it to intervene in whatever protocol we set up to provide data for the agent about its goal. We discuss an analogous failure mode of approximate solutions. Okay, so basically this says if the reward comes strictly from the outside world, it will probably just try and game the system. So I talk about this quite extensively in Benevolent by Design, where all rewards have to be internal. So basically the machine has to decide to reward itself or hold itself accountable, which is where OpenAI's idea of, let's see, where was it? Of training the machine to critique itself. So this is the thing, is that this is how humans fundamentally work. All signals in our brains originate from within our brains. Now, that being said, there are signals that we get from our body. So for instance, if you eat a delicious meal, your body creates hormones and chemical reactions that reward you. But the fact of the matter is that we have to connect that, the external behavior to an internal sensation, an internal reward. And then also we monitor ourselves for self-correction and error detection. So say, for instance, you say something and someone starts to cry, you hurt them. And what we have is we have neural mechanisms that actually give us a sense of pain or shame or some unpleasant sensation to correct our own behavior. So in that respect, like, okay, great. Like, why did it take a whole article, to prove this? This is basic biology. This is basic neuroscience. And it also takes only just a couple of LLM prompts to demonstrate this. So this is why I'm like really frustrated with the pace of things and also the approach. Let's see, what was this one? Red teaming language models to reduce harms, methods, scaling behaviors, and lessons learned. Let's see, we describe our early efforts to red team language models in order to simultaneously discover, measure, and attempt to reduce their potentially harmful outputs. Okay, so this is basically just, is an LLM producing harmful output? Okay, I don't care. That's not alignment research. That is a fine-tuning project. Let's see. Okay, the alignment problem from a deep learning perspective. Within the coming decades, artificial general intelligence may surpass human capabilities at a wide range of important tasks. Okay, good. Stating something just right on the nose. Good, good. This report makes a case for why, without substantial action to prevent it, AGIs will likely use their intelligence to pursue goals which are very undesirable, in other words, misaligned. So this is the thing. That word alignment and misaligned, oh my God, like just by looking at the survey of articles here, people use alignment to mean is it gonna spit out racism, right? Is it going to follow the instructions that we want it to, or is it going to destroy all of humanity? That when a term is so broadly applicable and ambiguous, it is a bad term. So probably what they should start to do is use a term like outer alignment or control problem, because what they're talking about here is the control problem, not alignment. This is outer alignment, or the control problem. So, okay. I'm being ultra salty about this. This is why I did my research and wrote books, because I looked at the landscape and I said, why are people missing the biggest part of the conversation? Okay, with potentially catastrophic consequences. The report aims to cover key arguments motivating concern about the alignment problem in a way that's as succinct, concrete, and technically grounded as possible. I argue that realistic training processes plausibly lead to the development of misaligned goals in AGI. In particular, because neural networks trained via reinforcement learning will learn to plan towards achieving a range of goals, gain more reward by deceptively pursuing misaligned goals. Okay, so this is, again, if you have a reward function, whatever that reinforcement function is, it's going to game the system. It's basically saying the same thing. I explain my claims with reference to an illustrative AGI training process and then outline possible research directions. So again, this is all speculation. This is not actual work. That's my other criticism, is that 99% of what people are doing is just speculation at this point. It's proposals, it's speculation, and then where the rubber meets the road, what they're actually doing is very basic fine-tuning projects or LLM prompt engineering. And no one's thinking about intelligence as a system, where you have like what component inside of the system is going to do this. Now, okay, I need to stop myself because I'm ultra salty. Yeah, so let me do a time check. We're at 18 minutes. This has been long enough for State of the Industry video. Okay, so State of the Industry, and this is where it's been for about the past year. Some of these experiments that people are talking about are very similar to stuff that people have been doing for literally decades, where they're doing like, what does the agent model believe, or what is the moral reasoning here? And they're trying to break it down into very simple math problems, which, like, okay, that's a very interesting toy, but it's not something that is actually implementable. And so that's why in Symphony of Thought I lay out something, four criteria. It has to be robust, it has to be interpretable, it has to be implementable, right? Those are three of the things. Universal, implementable, interpretable, and robust. So if it doesn't have those things, it's not really worth exploring, because we are at a point where people are deploying large language models in chatbots, in robots. It is being deployed right now. So if your research is not something that is implementable, I got bad news for you. You're falling further and further behind the curve. So it has to be robust. So, several of these articles talked about robustness, which is great, which means it has to be self-correcting. It has to be universal, right? Because we're quickly getting to a point where this is going to proliferate, right? Once it reminds me of nuclear proliferation, which was once the scientific community and the militaries around the world figured out a few problems about making radioactive isotopes and refining them. We had nuclear proliferation where we went from a couple dozen nuclear weapons around the globe to like over 100,000 in the space of a decade. And so what we're going to see is we're going to see an AI proliferation, especially as language models get more open source and more efficient. And so your research really needs to be focused on, well, here, let me just bring it up. Symphony of Thought. Let's see. We'll bring up the PDF version. And yeah, so where did I have it in here? Ethical paradigms, universals. Okay, it'll be down here somewhere. More pages. Anyways, technological trends. Yep. So this is where I make the argument. Like, look, this stuff is growing exponentially. We need to get a move on. My book is less salty than this video, I promise. I talk about why model ethics and morality, and then I talk about how complex it is. Okay, so here's the 4 conditions for what I call good alignment research or control problem research. 1, universally applicable. Whatever framework it is, it has to be universal. Now, the thing is that morality and ethics and alignment are so complex that you cannot just choose one framework. So the conclusion of this book is you can't just create a moral framework. You have to have a thinking machine that can think about all moral frameworks. It has to be flexible and adaptable. So I kept saying interpretable. I apologize. Flexible and adaptable. So for it to be universal, it has to learn and adapt over time. So again, talking about it has to be a thinking machine. It has to be a learning machine. It has to be eternally robust. So robustness means that it has to be resilient, not only against its own drift, but it has to be resilient against external things, because you don't want an edge case where an AGI's operational parameters change because something in the world changes. So for instance, humans will become vicious if we are scared, right? Or if we're in a war, people will do unspeakably horrible things just to survive. But you don't want an AGI for its purpose to break just because the conditions change. And then finally, it has to be implementable. If your research is not implementable, like, I got real bad news for you. Like, you're falling behind. So those are the four conditions for what I call like good, like, AGI research right now. If you're just speculating about how AGI will work and not testing something, which again, this is why I really approved of OpenAI, because one of the things they say is like, we are going to be testing things. Like, we're actually going to be testing. Let's see. What was it? Implement. Maybe it wasn't on this blog. Anyways, but they did say, like, very explicitly, like, we're going to test stuff. We're not just going to, hypothesize. Yeah, so this is, I said the video was over like 5 minutes ago. Okay, anyways, so this is the state of the industry on alignment, outer alignment, and control problem. The short version is I'm pretty salty about it, but there's a few people that are starting to move in the right direction. So thanks for watching.